May-December. A film available on Netflix follows TV actress Elizabeth, played by Natalie Portman, as she arrives in Savannah to shadow and do some research on Gracie, played by Julianne Moore, who she will be playing in an upcoming indie movie. But what is disturbing about Gracie is that she's married to Joe, who she met and slept with while he was a schoolmate of her son in the 7th grade and only 13 years old. She was sent to prison, where she then gave birth to their first child. But now they seemingly live a somewhat normal life, having raised 3 children together, and are now about to become empty nesters. In this video, I want to explore each of the main characters, Elizabeth, Gracie, and Joe, and their motivations. Elizabeth. A lot of the tension in this film comes from us as an audience struggling to really understand Elizabeth's intentions. Is she doing all of this to simply amplify that cycle of entertainment of this tragic story, utilizing this previously hot topic as a way to drive attention to herself? Or does she really want to educate the public of who Gracie and Joe really are as individuals, beyond what the stories that was in the tabloids? Which is the reason she initially gives to Gracie and Joe. I think the most telling scene behind what is making Elizabeth tick is when she does a Q&A at a drama class at the high school of Gracie and Joe's twin children, and she discusses the intimacy actors and crew members feel when shooting a sex scene, clearly referring to the scene that will depict Gracie and Joe's first encounter. Elizabeth relishes the attention and intrigue into her craft of acting that the Q&A brings, and the atmosphere gets pretty uncomfortable. Someone then asks her, "Why would you want to play a bad character?" And she says, what a lot of us would say is that characters who do bad things are the most interesting. It's not judging your character. What we're curious about is getting into the heart of a human, which is always complicated and never perfect. There is an initial tension and awkwardness as she is clearly referring to Gracie as a morally ambiguous character and her kids in that class. But there is a broader theme being introduced. How far will you go for the sake of art? I mean, if you're playing a serial killer, how far is it okay to do research into the role? I mean, does it mean you truly need to go out and kill a bunch of people to feel what that feels like? And is it right to prepare for a role like this by literally trying to feel what it was like to groom someone?
I already have an idea of what it must have felt like.
What felt like?
I was sneaking around with you.
With the scene of Elizabeth reenacting the sex scene in the stockroom of the pet store where Gracie was caught having sex with Joe, and then ultimately seducing Joe, re-abusing a person who grew up in this abusive relationship and that was groomed, it shows that there isn't a line that Elizabeth isn't willing to cross. To Elizabeth, Gracie and Joe's lives are merely intriguing stories for her to study, but for the couple, it's real life. She essentially just came in and low-key blew up their lives for the sake of art and her career. And at the end, it's clear. Elizabeth's movie is a joke. Despite all the effort and time spent with Gracie and her family, the look and feel of the movie is cheap and her acting is trash. We see them film the scene of Gracie seducing Joe in the supply room, and after filming the same scene over and over...
Wait, can we do it again, please? Please, just for me?
Lizzie.
Please, it's getting more real.
Going again?
And she says this throughout the film. She wants things to feel more real. And this is just a justification for her actions to protect herself from the truth of her own cruelty and predatory nature. Gracie. Gracie, on the other hand, hopes that Elizabeth will portray her with dignity and honor and show the public that she genuinely fell in love with a 13-year-old boy and they still have a loving relationship to this day. In a way, validating all of her previous actions of grooming a 13-year-old and then forcing him to raise a child and eventually a family with her. The question with Gracie is whether she truly doesn't feel like she did anything wrong and she just simply loves Joe so much, or whether she's aware of the seriousness of her actions and just acts naive as a way to manipulate the perception of her and to allow herself to remain in a state of denial. She seems not to realize just how off some of the things she says are.
And my son Georgie was in the same year as Joe at school, so technically I would have met him there, but I don't have any memory of that.
Right.
I mean, what? Does she not know how that sounds? But there is a moment where Elizabeth confronts Gracie about her denial of her wrongdoing and her naivety in expecting her life to just be perfect. And Gracie affirms that, yes, she is naive. And she even explains it's been to her benefit, to her saving grace at times, which suggests that she prefers to just remain in this state of denial and ignorance. In Gracie and Elizabeth's final interaction, Gracie reveals that she speaks with her son Georgie every day and explains what Georgie had told Elizabeth previously about Gracie's brothers abusing her in her youth was just not true. And then she boasts about her lack of insecurity. This catches Elizabeth off guard, and she sort of starts to realize that maybe Gracie had more control over Elizabeth's perception of the events than she had initially led on. We aren't given any concrete answers to what Gracie was really thinking. It's left intentionally ambiguous because, let's face it, she's probably been so caught up in this web of lies and delusion, needing to maintain that her relationship and love for Joe is real because she doesn't want to lose that love and attention that she gets from Joe and her kids. And she can't face the fact that she really is the bad guy. She really is the true predator of the story, Joe. While Gracie and Elizabeth have their one-upping battle for who is the better predator, of which Joe is just the victim, this shakeup allows Joe to really start to question his outward declarations, what he's telling the world, such as claiming that he wanted that relationship with Gracie.
I wanted it.
And he begins to unravel his inner feelings to understand and realize what he was robbed of, his youth. Never before had he felt empowered to challenge the life that Gracie just forced onto him. You can sense it early on in Joe's eyes. Under what seems to be a happy marriage, you can feel the discomfort and dysfunction, that their age difference and the circumstances of their relationship really has had a profound impact on Joe. Gracie still treats him like a child, giving him chores to do, nagging him. His body language and speech is awkward, giving this feeling that his development and maturity has been stunted. He's a person that is so clearly filled with fear that his world will just come crashing down around him if he admits his true feelings. So to be strong, he feels like he has to act like he's fine and that being with Gracie is what he really wants. But through the film, we really start to see Joe sort of dive deeper into this feeling. Joe texts back and forth with a friend from a Monarch Butterfly Facebook group and even proposes that they take a vacation together. He's eventually rebuffed and reminded that he's married. When he visits his father, Joe ponders what life will be like with Gracie once their children have left for college. And in a heartbreaking scene, Joe shares a joint with his son on the roof. He reveals he's never tried it before, again showing us just how much he's missed out on his own childhood. And Joe opens up to his son about his insecurities as a father, and he hopes he's made all the right decisions in raising them while subconsciously reflecting on his deep internal regret. He's brought them into this world in this situation that he feels trapped into. While high, Joe breaks down and cries into his son's arms.
Bad things, they happen, and we do bad things also.
This scene truly captures how Joe's stalling of maturity has made him stuck between the adulthood forced upon him and the adolescence he was robbed of. Joe is later manipulated by Elizabeth, feeling as though they really have made a connection together. Joe gives Elizabeth a letter Gracie wrote him when he was 13 years old, hoping it will help her with her research, but he asks that she reads it later. They end up sleeping together, but once done, Elizabeth attempts to read Joe's letter right there and then when he's not looking, doubling down again on just how much she's crossed the line regarding her research. Joe had slept with Elizabeth because he thought his actions were finally within his control for the first time in his adult life, but ended up once again being the prey, the object of abuse for another person's desires. This is just what grown-ups do. Such a response speaks to Joe's innocence and lack of ever having grown up, and goes to the idea that predatory grown-ups such as Elizabeth, such as Gracie, they prey on other weaker people. Following his interaction with Elizabeth, Joe confronts Gracie about the origins of their relationship and questions her as to whether he was too young. Joe struggles to formulate his thoughts, again alluding to his emotional immaturity, especially when faced with Gracie's claim that Joe was in fact the one that seduced her.
You seduced me.
It was his fault. He pursued her, showing us how she's continued to manipulate him for all these years. Gracie shuts down the argument and just walks away, leaving Joe without the answers he needed. When we finally reach the graduation, we reach the first moment of Joe's life with Gracie as empty nesters. Joe watches his children from the bleachers and has a moment of release, and he just lets it all out. He can finally acknowledge, even if it's just to himself, the abuse he suffered and the childhood that was stolen from him. He sees his kids can stand on their own 2 feet, and he finally seems able to let go of the pressure of fatherhood that he was forced into way too early. Anyways, I hope this all made sense. For more video analysis, go ahead and check this video right here. Thanks again. Bye.